The spring water murmured in its stone channel, running through the dark court with a sound like slow breathing. A single oil lamp leaned in the still air, its flame low and yellow, barely trembling on the wick, and the oily, sweet smell of it hung close to the wall, warm and faint, mixing with the last traces of incense that had settled into the stone hours ago. Somewhere nearby, a last wisp of laurel and burnt honey cooled on a small altar, its scent sinking into the warm marble, becoming part of the night itself. The colonnades stood pale and empty, their long rows of columns catching faint starlight on their fluted shafts. And between them, the sacred court lay open to the sky, breathing slowly after the long day, the heat of the afternoon still rising in soft waves from the stone floor, rising and fading until the marble cooled at last into the warm night. The last of the pilgrims had washed at the sacred well before dusk, cupping the cold water in their hands and drinking from it, then pouring the rest over their shoulders in the old way. They had made their small offerings, cakes of barley and honey wrapped in fig leaves, a little incense ground fine and pale, a few dried figs laid out with quiet hope. And some had left their terracotta models, a small clay ear or foot or hand, moulded in the shape of the place that ached, the old language of the body speaking to the god in simple shapes. The priests had damped the fires on the altars, and the smoke had risen thin into the warm evening, carrying with it the last of the day's devotion, the last whispered prayers, the last rustle of wool and sandal on the stone. The crowds that had filled the porticos at noon, the footsore and the sleepless and the anxious, the slowly mending and the merely tired, had all been fed a little, bathed in the sacred water, calmed by the priests' low voices, and led away to rest. Now the sanctuary was empty of voices, and the only movement was the running water in its channels, and the slow settling of heat from the marble into the cooling air, and the faint drift of a moth near the lamp flame. In the long, dim room of the incubation hall, the sleepers lay on low pallets along the walls, each wrapped in clean white wool, the fleeces thick and soft beneath them, smelling faintly of lanolin and sun. An oil lamp burned low at either end of the hall, its light just enough to show the pale shapes of the sleepers, the rise and fall of their breathing, the quiet of many people falling asleep on purpose. A woman from the coast, her skin still faintly salted from the sea road, turned onto her side and settled deeper into the wool, her face softening in the dark, the lines of worry smoothing from her forehead as her breath slowed. A man who had walked for 3 days to reach the sanctuary lay on his back with his hands folded on his chest, his breathing already slow and even, the rhythm of someone who had finally arrived somewhere safe. A child slept between her parents, her small hand curled open on the fleece. An old woman from the inland hills breathed with a faint rasp that was already gentler than it had been at noon. The whole room held one long shared breath, the deep hush of a place built for rest, where the only purpose was to lie still and wait for a dream, where the darkness itself was part of the cure, wrapping around each sleeper like the wool wrapped around their shoulders. The sacred water ran everywhere through the precinct, in little channels cut through the stone, under the colonnades, past the altars, murmuring its low song through the dark. The well at the heart of the court was deep and cold, and the water that rose from it had been running since before the first pilgrim came, since before the first stone was laid, tasting of stone and darkness, and something older than the temple itself. It was part of the cure. To drink it and feel the coldness spread down the throat, to wash in it and feel the road dust dissolve, to cup it in the hands and feel its weight, its clearness, its promise of renewal. The small round temple of the god stood nearby, its dome pale under the stars, built in this very century of smooth marble that caught the starlight and held it. The garlands from the day's offerings drying on its altars, laurel leaves curling at the edges, the smell of cooled incense still clinging to its walls like a memory of prayer. The colonnades stretched away on every side, their long shaded porticos empty now, the marble giving back the last of the day's warmth into the warm night air. The columns standing in their rows like silent guardians. A honey-coloured snake glided slow and unafraid across the floor of the incubation hall, its scales catching the lamplight as it moved between the pallets, warm and drowsy and holy. Its body thick as a child's wrist, its movement smooth and continuous, the way water moves, the way health itself moves when it returns to a body. It was one of the god's own creatures, tame and harmless, a rat snake that had lived in the sanctuary for years, shedding its old skin in some quiet corner and slipping out new. The way health itself returns to a body that has been sick, the way pain loosens and drifts away in sleep. It coiled now beside a sleeper's pallet, its small head resting on its own loops, its eyes closed to thin golden lines, and lay still, a living warmth in the dark, a presence older than the temple, as old as the first time someone lay down sick and woke well. At the threshold of the hall, one of the temple dogs lifted its head, its ears pricked for a moment at some sound too faint for human hearing, then lowered them again, padded once across the court with soft footfalls on the stone, and settled again at the foot of a column, its breathing slow and deep. The sacred life of the place kept gentle company with the sleepers, and nothing troubled the dark. Through the sleeping hall, through the warm stone courts, through the minds of the pilgrims half dreaming on their fleeces, an old story drifted like scent on the night air. The story of how the gentle healer came to be, how a child was given into kind keeping and grew to be the god whose mildness filled this place. It was the kind of story the sick told one another by day, while they waited their turn at the spring, and half dreamed by night as the lamps burned low. Soft and worn at the edges, told so many times that the words had grown smooth as river stones, and as it drifted through the sanctuary, the night quietly opened onto a green mountain far away, a wooded slope in high summer, where the pines stood tall against a blue sky, and the air smelled of thyme and cold water and crushed herbs underfoot. Mount Pelion rose in green folds against the sky, its slopes thick with forest, its high meadows bright with summer, the mountain breathing in the heat of the day and breathing it out again at evening. In a glen on the mountainside, under the shade of tall pines that had grown there since before memory, there was a cave with a cold spring running at its mouth, the water clear and tasting of stone and moss, and something sweet that came from deep in the earth. The slopes around the cave were thick with every healing herb. Silvery wormwood with its bitter scent that cleared the head, sweet fennel and dill nodding on tall stems in the breeze, thyme and marjoram warm and sharp in the sun, releasing their oils when a foot brushed past. Poppies drooping their red heads at the field's edge, their milky sap a gift of sleep. Mallow with its soft pink flowers that soothed the skin. Betony with its spiked purple blooms that eased the mind. Willow grew by the stream, its bark smooth and pale, and dandelion showed its milky sap where a leaf was torn. The green light fell through the pine needles in soft shafts, gold green and moving, and bees moved lazily among the flowers, their hum low and constant, and the whole glen breathed with the small sounds of a hillside in summer. The stream over its stones, a bird in the branches, the wind moving through the herbs and releasing their scent in waves. In that glen lived Chiron, the wise centaur, not wild like his brothers, but gentle and learned, a kindly teacher who raised heroes and healers in the shade of his cave. He knew every herb on the slope and what each could soothe, which leaf cooled a fever when pressed to the temples, which root quieted a cough when steeped in water, which bark eased pain when chewed or bound to a wound, which flower calmed a troubled mind when its scent was breathed in the dark. He moved slowly through his glen on his 4 strong legs, bending to touch a plant with his broad hands, crushing a leaf between his fingers to release its scent, tasting a stem to test its strength, gathering what he needed in a woven basket that hung at his side. The cold spring at his cave's mouth was his mirror and his medicine cup, and the pines above him were his shelter and his quiet companions, their needles whispering when the wind moved through them. He was the gentlest of all the centaurs, and the mountain loved him, and the herbs grew thick around his home because he tended them and knew them by name, because he understood that healing was a conversation between the body and the earth, a slow and patient exchange. A baby was brought to that glen, a small child given into Chiron's kind keeping by Apollo, the god of light and healing, who looked down from his high place and saw the wisest of teachers living in the green shade, and trusted his son to those gentle hands. The centaur received the child with his large, soft hands and laid him on a bed of dried herbs in the cave, thyme and lavender and sweet grasses. And the baby slept there, warm and safe, breathing the scent of the mountain, the scent of healing. As the child grew, he walked beside Chiron through the glen on small bare feet, learning the herbs one by one, which leaf to press to a hot forehead, which root to steep in water for a troubled chest, which bark to chew for pain, how to bind a wound with soft linen torn into strips, how to calm a frightened body with a low voice, how to sit beside the sick and simply be with them in their discomfort, until the discomfort loosened. The boy's hands were light and careful, and his eyes were patient, and he learned not only the herbs, but the art of being with the sick, of sitting beside them in silence that was not empty but full of attention, of speaking softly so that the voice itself became part of the cure, of touching them without hurry so that the touch itself told the body it was safe, of letting the body find its own way back to health. He learned that healing was not a battle, but a gentleness, not a force, but a patience, not a conquest, but a return. The boy grew into a young man, so mild and so skilled that his lightest touch and his low voice could take the fear out of any sickness. He walked the mountain with a staff in his hand, and on that staff a harmless, honey-colored snake had coiled one day and stayed. A creature that shed its old skin in some quiet place and slipped out new, gleaming and tender, the sign of a body renewing itself and of health returning. The emblem of a life that could cast off what was worn and painful and begin again. The snake became his companion, as much a part of him as his gentle hands, and wherever he walked on the mountain, the sick came to him and left easier, their brows cooler, their breathing slower, the tightness in their chests loosened by his presence. He was the god of getting better slowly, of rest, of the body healing itself in sleep. And his presence was like cool water on a fevered brow, quiet, unhurried, kind, asking nothing, demanding nothing, simply being there in the way that water is there, in the way that shade is there, in the way that sleep itself is there when it is needed most. His daughter Hygeia walked beside him, calm and clean, the goddess of health and cleanliness, her own snake drinking from a bowl she carried, and together they moved through the green world, making it well, making it whole, making it gentle. And when he walked down from the mountain at last, with the snake-twined staff in his hand, health seemed to follow him like a soft breeze. And wherever they passed, the springs ran clear, and the sick rooms smelled of clean linen and fresh water. Telesphorus, the small hooded child god of recovery, trotted along behind them, his little cloak pulled up over his head, the one who stood for getting better by slow degrees, for the small improvements that gathered like beads on a string. The young healer did not shout or command or strike any blow against the dark. He simply moved through the world mild and tireless, and the bodies of the suffering remembered how to heal themselves. His father Apollo shone above him, the god of light and medicine, and in the night Hypnos, sleep itself, wrapped him in dark wings, and the dreams carried his gentleness down into the sleeping minds of all who waited for him. In the incubation hall, a sleeper stirred and settled deeper into the white wool, her face smoothing in the lamplight, a fevered brow already cooler than it had been at dusk, the heat that had clung to her since the sea road now loosening and drifting away like smoke. The honey-colored snake that had coiled beside her pallet lay warm and drowsy, its scales faintly gleaming in the low light. The same creature that twined the god's staff in the old story, the same emblem of health returning, of old skin shed and new skin grown. The tale and the night rhymed softly. The green mountain and the marble court, the centaur's glen and the sacred hall, the child learning herbs at Chiron's side, and the sick lying down to dream of healing. And the rhyme was so gentle that no one needed to speak it aloud. It simply breathed in the dark, the way the spring water breathed in its channels, the way the sleepers breathed on their fleeces, the way the old story breathed through the sanctuary, half remembered and half dreamed, real as the marble and the water and the warm night air. A therapeut moved through the colonnade, his sandals soft on the stone, carrying a small oil lamp in a clay holder that shielded the flame from the air. He stopped to trim a lamp that had burned too low, lifting the wick with a thin bronze tool, and the flame steadied and grew a little brighter, casting his shadow long against the column, then settled again into its low yellow burning, patient and constant. He laid a fresh fleece at the foot of a pallet, where a pilgrim had kicked his covering aside in his sleep, spreading the white wool with care, tucking it gently around the sleeper's feet. He carried his small light down the long portico, past the round temple where the garlands dried, past the well where the water ran cold and clear and endless, and the shadows moved softly around him, keeping the long night quietly, so that nothing troubled the sleep of the sick. On the hillside above, the great stone theatre stood empty and silvered by the stars, its tiers of seats pale in the dark, its stage empty of actors and music, its vast silence a kind of presence. The sacred way of columns that had brought the pilgrims up to the gate lay dark and still, the treatment rooms quiet, the long, vaulted underground passage breathing cool air into the warm night, a hidden river of darkness and stone that ran beneath the sanctuary like a dream running beneath waking. Along the walls of the colonnades, the votive gifts stood in rows. Little terracotta ears and feet and hands, small limbs moulded in clay with careful attention to the shape of a heel, the curve of an ankle, the shell of an ear, left in thanks by those who had been cured, who had woken from their incubation with the god's prescription clear in their minds, or simply with the sense that something had shifted. They were simple things, rough and honest, the shape of a healed body part offered back to the god who had made it well. Near them stood the small image of Telesphorus, the child god of Pergamon, in his little hooded cloak, the god of recovery, of getting better by slow degrees, his face mild and patient under the hood, his small form a promise that healing takes time, that the body deserves the slowness of its own mending. And there was Hygeia with her bowl, her snake drinking from it, the goddess of health and cleanliness, and Apollo at the gate, the father of the healer, god of light and medicine, his lyre silent now in the dark, but still present, still holding the harmony of the place. The whole precinct was held in a kind healing holiness, not loud or demanding, but gentle as the running water, as the low lamps, as the breath of the sleepers in the hall. A holiness that asked only that the sick be made comfortable, that the night be warm, that the dreams be kind. The great terraced city of Pergamon lay dark on its hill above the sanctuary, its streets quiet, its houses breathing with the sleep of those who lived in them, the theatres and the agora and the quiet halls where the books were kept, all still under the stars. The whole city folded into the warm night like a hand folding closed. Below, the plain stretched away to the far coast, the sea a faint gleam on the horizon where the sky met the water, and above it all, the enormous star-thick sky arched over the round temple's dome, the Milky Way a pale river of light across the dark. So many stars that the darkness itself seemed bright, seemed alive. The warm summer night held everything, the city and the sanctuary, the sleepers and the gods, the old story and the living dark, in one vast, gentle stillness. The cicadas had gone quiet, their days singing spent, and the running spring water was the only steady sound, murmuring through its channels under the stars. The deep, safe silence of a place built for rest, a place where the sick were safe, where the night was mild, where the God was kind, where everyone was sleeping toward getting well. The whole sanctuary sank fully toward sleep. The lamps faded lower, their flames shrinking to small yellow points in the dark, then to faint glows, then to embers barely visible, until the dark became complete and kind. The water murmured in its channels, running through the stone, running through the night, the same water that had washed the first pilgrim and would wash the last. The water that remembered nothing and forgave everything. The honey-colored snakes lay coiled and drowsy among the pallets and in the warm corners of the court, their breathing slow, their bodies soft loops of living warmth. The temple dogs breathed slow and deep at the thresholds, their dreams running through fields of scent and starlight. The pilgrims lay still on their white fleeces, their faces soft, their breathing long and even, each one held in a dream that might be the god's own visit, his light hand on a sore place, his low voice saying without words that the morning would be easier, that the body knows how to heal, that rest is the first medicine. The priests moved soft and far away, keeping the watch, their sandals silent on the stone, and the gentle God himself moved unseen through the dark, through the dreams, through the long, warm night, making them quietly well, making them whole, making the dark itself a kind of healing, until the voice that told it sank toward silence, and the night held everything, and there was only the running water and the stars and the deep, safe breathing of sleep.